Hi, this is Ryan Reuter at Oklahoma State University. I want to spend just a few minutes introducing some of the basic concept and nutrient requirements of grazers. And so let's talk about cattle, sheep, goats, and horses. Those are the main grazers that we're going to talk about. Obviously, there are others, but these are the ones that we have described their nutrient requirements pretty well for. And so I want you to understand that these different animals do not have the same nutrient requirements. Hopefully that's obvious to you if you've had our applied nutrition class. But each of these species has different requirements for nutrients in order to keep them, make them productive and healthy and grow well. Their nutrient requirements also change over the year. So at any time of the year, these different animals may have different nutrient requirements as they're in different production stages. Okay, there are differences in nutrient requirements due to different breeds, to types of these animals, different sizes of the animals have different requirements. So there are a lot of variables that go into understanding and calculating nutrient requirements of these different grazers. But we're going to try to simplify it a little bit and show you some of the concepts here that are real important for forage management. So here's a couple of comparisons here that we can start with. The first thing that we could think about are just some basic descriptors of these animals, and this table shows typical weight of some of these animals. So beef cattle, beef cows typically will weigh somewhere between 1,000 and 1,300 pounds. We actually have cows that are substantially bigger than that in a lot of operations, but typical weight to be 1,000 to 1,300 pounds. Sheep, range sheep may typically weigh 150 pounds. Goats may weigh 100 pounds, and then horses may be from 1,000 to 1,200 pounds. So you can kind of see there's quite a range in weight, and that weight, body size, has a big impact on dry matter intake, on how much forage each of these animals need. And so dry matter isn't really a nutrient, but I think understanding dry matter intake is certainly important, and we'll revisit intake here in another presentation or two. But an interesting range, or a good range to have in your mind for beef cows that might weigh from 1,000 to 1,300 pounds would be that they require somewhere, or they're going to eat somewhere between 20 and 26 pounds of dry matter per day. Those 150-pound sheep may need about 3 pounds per day. The 100-pound goat may need about 2 pounds per day. And then we go back to horses. 1,000, 1,200-pound horses may eat 30 to 36 pounds of dry matter per day. And so I think one of the real obvious things is that dry matter intake is largely a function of body size, of body weight of these animals. So that's something to keep in mind. And we'll come back and revisit that in the near future. Something that's interesting to think about is that digestibility of any specific forage that we might be interested in is different, but depending on the type of animal that you're talking about and the type of digestive system those animals have. So digestibility is the amount of the nutrient that actually disappears and absorbs, that the animal absorbs and can use. So it's essentially what doesn't show up in the manure. And so you can see here that this is the same feed. This is whole maize plant pellets that were fed to rabbits or horses, and you can see the differences in the digestibility of the different nutrients based on those two species. So horses digest a lot more of the dry matter than rabbits do, but rabbits digest a lot more of the protein in this feed than horses do. And so you can see there's big differences. And so when you're thinking about the animal that you're trying to describe their nutrient requirements for and meet their nutrient requirements with forages, realize that the digestibility of the different nutrients in forages aren't always the same from one animal type to the next. You're probably going to need to use digestibility numbers that are specific for the animal type that you're trying to meet the requirements for. Here's another concept to illustrate how nutrient requirements change over the season. Okay, and these are for breeding ewes across a calendar year. And this is their daily digestible energy requirement. So this is DE in megacalories per day. It would be equivalent with a mathematical conversion, be equivalent to total digestible nutrients in kilograms per day, or TDN. So this is just the amount of energy that these animals need. And you can see here that in early gestation, these animals have not a moderate energy requirement, and then as they and as they lamb and have a baby, that they're obviously going to move into a lactation phase, and that's going to increase their nutrient requirement, their energy requirement. And you see that happen here. So early lactation, the 8 weeks of early lactation, is when their energy requirement is the greatest. It's up over 6 megacalories per day. Okay, and then we're going to wean that lamb, and their nutrient requirements, their energy requirements dramatically drop off with weaning as we end the lactation demand, and they go from over 6 megacalories of DE per day down to 2.5 megacalories of DE per day. So a pretty dramatic decrease. And so this ewe here would be at maintenance, and the dry period would be at maintenance for this time of the year. And so you can see that's when her nutrient requirements are the lowest. And so you want to understand these curves over time and over seasons so that you can match your forage production and forage quality with the nutrient requirements of the animals you're trying to feed. Here's the same kind of thing, same kind of graph for cattle. And this is their daily requirement. In general terms, you could think of this being the requirement for crude protein or for energy. This is kind of a generalized figure about their nutrient requirements in general, and you can kind of see what goes on over here at maintenance. This gray bar down here is maintenance, and so the requirement just to maintain the cow stays constant as the cow weight stays constant throughout the year. So that's a constant. But what you'll notice is a beef cow is hardly ever at their maintenance requirement. Okay, so wherever you want to start thinking about the production cycle, you can see that the cow is either always lactating or gestating the whole year round, and for several months here they're both lactating and gestating. And so here we could start at calving, and you could see as they calve, they've got this huge demand that lactation places on their nutrient requirements. So they've got to have a lot of extra crude protein and energy to meet this lactation demand. That demand builds and reaches a peak right before the breeding season. If we want these cows to stay on a 365-day calving interval, we're going to need to rebreed them here basically right at the peak of lactation. And so this time of their production cycle is when they've got the greatest nutrient demands. And then as lactation starts to tail off, those demands come down, and then we get to weaning and end the lactation demand, and her nutrient requirements decrease quite a bit. They don't go all the way to maintenance, but they decrease quite a bit. And then as time goes on and the calf starts to really grow, the fetus that she's carrying in the last few months of gestation, that calf really grows quite a bit and requires a lot of nutrients to do that, and so her requirements go up again until she calves again and starts the cycle over. And so that's real important to understand that phase of nutrient requirements and cycle of nutrient requirements, so that again that you can match those requirements to the forage availability and forage quality that your land will produce. You do not want to attempt to have your cows at their peak of lactation when you have the least amount of forage that's the lowest quality available. You're fighting, in that case, you're fighting against what is going to be the most efficient way to use your forage. You want to, in general, you would like to time it so that when you have the most forage available, that's the best quality. That's when you've got this lactation period going on. And so that's why it's real important to understand these nutrient requirement fluxes. And we'll pick up with that in the next talk.